The GameStop stock thing made me proud. That was funny.
It was funny. I don't know if it filled me with pride. I would have preferred that it filled me with money, but I wasn't. And I don't know enough about the stock market to be like, now's the time to invest. Because right after I'm like, I'm gonna throw $1,000 at this GameStop thing, let her rip. It'll be like I let it rip, and it just the stock just plummets off the roof, and I'm like, well, I should have seen this coming as a layperson who knows nothing.
I did actually make $80 in money on the stock market after that happened.
Hey, my Bitcoin is up, I think $300.
Hey-o.
I'll be able to buy a special edition Switch pretty soon. Which, ooh. Speaking of transitional segues, brings us into the Nintendo Direct that we had earlier this week. I think it was on the 17th. That sounds right. Whatever. But the Nintendo Direct is full of, it's like an hour and a half long. We can't possibly talk about everything, but we will go off on tangents and not talk about anything. No, I'm kidding.
That's what we do.
It is. But some notable stuff that I feel like we're really excited about, and you might be too. There's Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword is getting an HD remake for the Switch, which I'm really excited about because a lot of people didn't like Skyward Sword because they did a lot of new things. They had you use motion controls to swing your sword, similar to how they did with the other Zelda that came out earlier on the Wii. Folks weren't super jazzed about it. There were a couple of like RPG elements that they had woven in, which I really enjoyed because I'm a sucker for RPG elements, even in like Flash games. If you put progression in, I don't care how much I don't even enjoy the game, I'll play it.
That's okay because he has that in the TV show too.
Yeah, right. But they added a bunch of stuff. People had mixed feelings about Skyward Sword, but if you haven't played it, you can formulate an opinion for yourself because it's coming to the Switch with an HD remake. It looks pretty good. And if you don't like the motion controls, they did mention in the Direct that they modified it so that you could play it with a handheld Switch with just the Joy-Cons, or you can play it on a Switch Lite as well. What else we got in terms of Zelda? What's that? Hyrule Warriors DLC.
Yeah.
I don't know too much about that because I was like, oh, cool, Hyrule Warriors DLC. I don't want spoilers because I'm not done the game yet, so I just skipped ahead. We had a teaser trailer for a new Star Wars game. We don't really know much of anything about it, just that it's like some kind of like multiplayer looking, not quite fighting game in the traditional sense, but like combat-based game. I'm guessing something akin to like the multiplayer experience from like Battlefront 2 or what's that other one? Jedi Knight 2?
Yeah, maybe. I don't really know, like, because like I'm looking at this, I'm like, I don't really know what it is because it's by Zynga, which is like,
yeah, right. That's already a bad sign. So
that's a red flag.
If you don't remember Zynga, Zynga is the company that created everybody's the most popular and most hated Facebook games back when people gave a damn about Facebook games. So like we were thinking like Farmville, like Pet Shopville, Chefville or whatever. I think they also made like a variation of Mafia and probably a variation of Tetris. But yeah, they're that company.
Yeah.
So it's been 10 years roughly since that age. So hopefully things will be a little better. Splatoon 3 is coming out.
That was pretty cool.
I've never played Splatoon. I've just never had any major interest in like arena-based multiplayer experience-focused games. Jerry, how do you feel about it?
I've played a little bit of Splatoon, and I like it a lot because it's a very unique style of like arena-based shooters. Like, there's not anything else like Splatoon, and just like it's the same reason that I like would enjoy the Persona games. Like, it's got a dope soundtrack. It's a ton of fun. It's flashy. Like, everything's pretty cool going on around. Like, there's a lot of variations in like what you can do. I think it's a good game. I'm excited for Splatoon 3, honestly. I want to see... It started off in a really interesting way of more of like a Borderlands-style setting, and then it moved into like Inkopolis. So I'm curious, like, if what story-wise would be going on there. Like, are they going to like start expanding story stuff more with that, or just whatever? But I'm excited about it. Splatoon's a really good like game series on the Nintendo's consoles. I was surprised to see that they're releasing another Splatoon already, just because I think Splatoon 2 came out. Yeah, Splatoon 2 came out on the Switch. So it's interesting to see that another Splatoon is also coming out on the Switch, like the same console.
And they just had their like national competition thing for Splatoon, didn't they?
Yeah. So it's really weird because Nintendo doesn't usually do that in the same console life cycle, which leads me to some speculation that I'll talk about later in the show. But I was excited about it. I didn't expect that to be at the end of the trailer. I was like, because the whole thing was like, they were revealing all these different games, these like smaller studio games, and they never really had anything that was big besides like Mario Golf, which granted, I'm very excited about Mario Golf because it looks really fun. So they didn't really have anything huge on there, and then they threw that in at the end. It was like, ah!
Yeah. But yeah, for me, it's like it's always been hard to keep my attention for like arena-based shooters. Probably because I was only ever really, really, really good at one of them, and I felt like I got my fill of the experience, and I was like, all right, cool. I need to go back to playing RPGs now. New Smash character coming down the pipe. People are kind of 50-50 about it. By 50-50, I mean either probably ambivalent or salty. It's a character or characters from Xenoblade Chronicles. I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but like
it is Pyra and Mithra, you peon.
There you go. Haven't played Xenoblade Chronicles.
So good.
But you can switch between them in mid-combat, and they have their own, movesets, all that razzmatazz. The community reception basically seems to be either ambivalence or salt, because the people who are salty are basically like, yet another sword character, and the people who are ambivalent are like, neat, another character. I am of the latter. I'm like, neat, another character. I'm hey, there we go, third category. I always enjoy, more content for games that I enjoy, and having more characters means I get to fight more diverse like folk online and that kind of thing. So I'm always happy to get more content. I'm not gonna thumb my nose at like, oh, characters with swords, and I'm like, oh, come on, man. It's like we got tweaks to Ryu and Ken. We got Terry Goodkind. It's like there's other characters. You always have Captain Falcon.
You always have Captain Falcon. That knee. I've been killed so many times with that stupid knee.
Yep, the knee of justice. But yeah, it's like I'm never gonna be mad at more content for a game that I like. Come on.
Yeah. And honestly, the thing about Pyra the Mithra is that like this is an IP that Nintendo is actually investing time into, and if you've played Xenoblade, you realize that this game is very good. Like, and yes, it's not like a classic character from a franchise you've known for a long time, but it's one of those things that I think they're trying to make one of their classic franchises. Mm-hmm. So it makes sense that they would add them, especially because in the first set of Spider Pass stuff, when the game first came out, Sakurai said he wanted to add a Xenoblade Chronicles 2 character to the game, but there wasn't enough time. Now he has that opportunity. And the switching mechanic between Pyra and Mithra is a very cool, unique addition that I'm not going to say why, because of reasons. But yeah, I'm excited about it.
Nice. And last, at least on the list of stuff that we'll talk about, because there's other stuff that's in the Nintendo Direct. So if you want to see more, peep the link on the Nintendo's website. But last thing is Monster Hunter Rise, which we already knew about. Like that was coming down the pipe. I mean, the demo's been out for maybe close to 3 weeks, probably close to a month now. So we knew that was coming, but also they're coming out with another special edition Switch for Monster Hunter Rise. And it got me thinking that like Nintendo's like one of the only folks who really capitalizes on their consumers' desire for special versions of the console.
Yeah.
Like it's like every, but like specific games will do like a special version stuff. Like you'll have like a Halo version of the Xbox whatever, or like a Gears of War version of whatever, or a Last of Us version of like a PlayStation, but whatever. But like you don't see like those are kind of like one-off things of like it's there for like a hot minute, and then you don't see anybody else do it pretty
Mhm.
much. For like almost for nearly the life cycle of the console. But Nintendo's like, oh, yo, like bam, here's an Animal Crossing version of a Switch. Like, here's a Mario version of the Switch. Here's a Smash version of the Switch. Here's a Zelda version of the Switch. Like, here's a Monster Hunter version of the Switch. And, like, I know people who have multiple Switches solely because they're like, damn, that Animal Crossing, teal and mint green just looks fresh as hell.
Tom Nook edition.
Right? And I want it.
It does.
It is. It's so fresh, and I'm a little salty that I don't have one. While I do have the economic means to buy multiple Switches, I do not have any motivation or reason other than that it looks nice and it would look cool on the shelf. Maybe I'll just take a picture of a Switch and put that on the shelf instead. But I think it's really cool that they actually do take the effort and the time to make special versions of their Switch, and like that it's actually appealing and that people buy it. I think that's neat.
So then let me ask you about this. And this is one of the things I wanted to talk about in the show that I hadn't put in the notes. How do you feel about the 4K Switch rumors that are getting more and more credence each day?
That there's going to be a Switch Pro.
Yes.
So we're at a point. So had you asked me like a year ago, which I think we may have.
We kind of talked about it.
We're coming up on it.
Yeah. Because I remember ranting about this probably like a year ago. Was that there's no reason for them to release a Switch Pro because they had somewhat recently released the Switch Lite, which was doing well. The Switch is continually popping off, and like at the time, like there's just not really like a major market for Switch Pro. Now I feel like Nintendo has become the king of indie games.
That's true.
I feel like they have as many good indie games, and probably as many garbage indie games, as a lot of other like maybe as much. I won't say as much as Steam, but because they're the one true king of indie games, the one above all of indie games.
Yeah.
But Nintendo can be the king of indie games of mortal.
The Duke.
Yeah, the Duke of indie games. They have a super huge backlog. They have a respectable backlog of what I would consider to be high-powered, quote-unquote, strong content games. Like you have like stuff like The Witcher 3, you have Skyrim, things that I feel like unless you're playing docked, are probably running in an underpowered state. Because like I think the Switch undocked plays at 720p.
Yeah.
Which is like when I'm playing The Witcher 3 for the first time, like the whole time I'm like, Jesus, this whole world is just beautiful to look at. And that's probably not something that I would be completely as enamored with on the Switch playing undocked. Docked, I'd be popping. Like the same way I was like, man, Breath of the Wild is just beautiful to look at. I think that they have a backlog of enough games, like they have Doom Eternals on the Switch. Bonkers. They have enough games of stuff that I feel like, benefits from being in like 4K or, like even some expanded resolution or, just graphical update, whatever. Even if it's not 4K and it's just like some kind of upscaling super version of a Switch or whatever. They have enough games that would benefit from that, where people who very much care about like graphics and stuff like that would not feel like they're missing out on part of that experience by playing it on the Switch. Because that's what I feel like is a thing that keeps the high graphics loving gamers away from those games on the Switch specifically. Is that like they're like, oh man, of course I'd love to be able to play The Witcher 3 anywhere. However, I feel like playing it on a Switch undocked, I'm not going to enjoy it visually as much, and so I'll just play it on PC. I feel like there's enough people for enough games that fall into that market of like, I want to play this game and I'd love to play it anywhere, but I don't want to play it on the Switch. That like there's reason and provocation for a 4K Switch. I'm not sure how well it would sell to the gen populace of people who already have a regular Switch and already have a regular a Switch Lite. That would be my concern, and like that's always the hang up that I come back to of like, why wouldn't Nintendo bother to make a 4K Switch? And the answer is because they could just not make a whole bunch of them, and then see how it goes. And then if they all sell out, then they'll be like, oh cool, then I guess we'll make more of these. And then they all sell out and like, oh cool, then I guess we'll make more of these. Like they tend to do with like everything else that sells like hotcakes.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's my thoughts.
So something to keep in mind is that obviously, the Switch Lite sold well because it was lower priced, and it did almost the same amount of launch numbers as the original Switch did. I think it was just shy by about by about 500,000. So original Switch did about 7 million in its initial launch, and then the Switch Lite did about 6.5 on its own.
That's impressive.
Was that when it launched, or was that like from Lifetime? That's
just when it launched. Lifetime numbers are. Let's see. What do I have? This is dated. So this is dated from last year. So this does not include how many times they've sold. From
the pandemic.
We know they sold a lot during the pandemic. So at that time it was at 55
because of
million.
Animal Crossing, as we all know.
We have COVID, but we also have Animal Crossing.
So it's not inconceivable to think that while a 4K Switch probably would not going to do the light numbers just because the cost. Like I think that's easy to. Like a 3.5, saying like 3.5 million, like that's not a. That wouldn't be. I mean, it's not super great. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, nothing. I was just saying that's nothing to sneeze at.
Yeah, it's like it's not a huge amount, but 3.5 million units sold on a 4K Switch, and then maybe more people, or maybe even they keep the light and they phase out the mid tier. You know, if they're able to get that cost to be the same. If they're like, okay, we were able to engineer this to a point where we can get the 4K to run, or maybe even 1440.
Yeah,
they could at least do that. You know, I think a lot of PC gamers would be like, acceptable resolution.
I'd be like,
all right.
I'm in.
Don't put. And
what's the other meme? It's like, son of a bitch. I'm in.
And Dean says, didn't the Switch Lite come out during the pandemic sellout of the Switch? I want to say the Switch Lite came out right before that.
It was definitely out before the pandemic.
Yeah, it was.
But what Steve's saying is that Animal Crossing released, and it also had
Animal Crossing did come out then, yeah.
It also had the Animal Crossing console come out, and that you couldn't find that, along with just trying to find a Switch or a Switch Lite. Lights did come back in the. They tended to pop up more. So if you were like, I want to hold out for the dockable, I was like, good luck.
Good luck.
You don't.
So I mean, it's better now, but it was rough.
Yeah, I'm a part of like a bunch of, well, not a bunch, I guess 2 is a lot of Animal Crossing Facebook groups, and I remember like during the first couple months of the pandemic, it was like, you know, people were like, oh man, I've been on a waiting list for 4 months to get a Switch, and it was like I finally bit the bullet, and like, you know, we masked up, and I went and waited at the store when it opened so I could get one and all that stuff. So it was like I and because of the way that Animal Crossing functioned at launch, you could only have one Animal Crossing file per console. So like parents who were playing and kids who were playing, their regular battle was parents are like, oh yeah, I'm doing this X, Y, and Z on my island, and my kid plays and they just fuck it up. So I bought them a Switch so they could fuck up their own island, and I can do my own thing.
Yeah.
And that was a lot of what folks were complaining about, and they were like, I need to get a second Switch because my family wants to play the game too, and I don't want them to ruin my island. So
that's fair.
You had a bunch of families getting Switch Lites and that kind of thing. So the reason why I asked is, was it gross or was it at launch? Was because I don't know how the Switch perception was at launch. You know, I figured it was like, oh yeah, this fills a need. If you play largely undocked, then the Switch Lite is a great tool for you to grab. But I highly expected that the pandemic coupled with the popularity of Animal Crossing causing both the Switch and the Switch Lite to like skyrocket in sales because a lot of people wanted to play, and parents and adult and kids wanted to play that game specifically. And it is just more, and like, you know, one of you can only be playing at a time in a fun way. Yeah. And it's just more conducive to just have a second Switch. And, you know, when you're sitting at home for weeks and months on end, it's just like, well, I might as well just buy one now. So that's why I asked about the gross sales over time.
Well, that's fair.